I never thought that attending my cousin Maria's wedding would become one of the most humiliating experiences of my life, until it transformed into something completely different. My name is Carlos, and I've always been the different one in my family. While my cousins pursued careers in law, medicine, and business, I chose a simpler path. I work as a maintenance supervisor at a small company, and honestly, I've never been ashamed of it. I earn enough to live comfortably, help my elderly mother, and even save a little each month. But my family, well, they've always seen me as the unsuccessful one. What they don't know is that over the past 15 years, I've been quietly investing every spare dollar I could save. My father, before he passed away, taught me about real estate and smart investments. Carlos, he used to say, it's not about how much you make, it's about how much you keep, and how wisely you use it. I listened to him, and while my family was spending their higher salaries on expensive cars, designer clothes, and fancy vacations, I was building something they couldn't see. I started small, buying a rundown duplex in a neighborhood everyone said was going nowhere. I fixed it up myself, working nights and weekends, learning plumbing, electrical work, and carpentry from YouTube videos and library books. When I rented it out, the income covered the mortgage and gave me a little extra. Within 2 years, I bought another property. Then, another. While my cousins were posting Instagram photos from their European vacations, I was quietly accumulating wealth that would outlast any designer handbag or luxury watch. By the time I turned 35, I owned 3 rental properties and had a stock portfolio that would have shocked my family. But I lived the same way I always had, driving my reliable 10-year-old Honda Civic, shopping at discount stores, and wearing the same simple clothes I'd always worn. Why? Because I learned early that real wealth isn't about looking rich. It's about actually being financially secure. When Maria's wedding invitation arrived, I was genuinely happy for her. She was marrying David, a successful architect, and from what I heard, it was going to be a grand celebration at one of the city's most exclusive venues. The invitation was elegant, printed on thick cream paper with golden details. As I read it, a knot formed in my stomach when I saw the dress code. Formal attire required. I looked at my closet and sighed. I had exactly one suit, a simple navy blue one I'd bought 3 years ago for my father's funeral. It wasn't expensive, but it was clean and well-maintained. My shoes were black leather, a bit worn, but polished until they gleamed. I could have afforded to buy a new suit, even an expensive one, but it seemed wasteful to spend hundreds of dollars on something I'd wear once. Besides, I didn't think it mattered that much. After all, we were there to celebrate love, not to compete in a fashion show. What I didn't tell anyone was that just 2 months before the wedding, Maria had called me in tears. It was a Tuesday evening and I was reviewing my investment portfolio when my phone rang. "Carlos," she sobbed, barely able to get the words out. "I don't know what to do. We're going to lose everything." "Slow down, Maria. What's happened?" Through her tears, she explained that she and David had put down a substantial deposit on their dream venue, La Mansión Dorada. But David's architectural firm had suddenly lost a major client, and they were facing serious financial difficulties. The venue required full payment 30 days before the event, or they would lose their booking and their $10,000 deposit. "We've already sent out 200 invitations," she cried. "The flowers are ordered, the caterer is booked. David's family has made arrangements to fly in from 3 different states. If we lose this venue, we'll have to cancel everything. I'm so embarrassed to even ask, but do you know anyone who might be able to lend us the money? We've tried the banks, but with David's company's financial situation, they won't approve a loan." I sat there listening to my cousin, the girl who used to build sandcastles with me at family beach trips, who had always been kind to me even when the rest of the family wasn't, cry about losing her dream wedding. I looked at my computer screen, showing my investment portfolio. Liquidating some of my assets would easily cover the entire venue cost. "How much do you need?" I asked quietly. $45,000, she whispered, like saying the number made it more real and more impossible. "I know it's a lot, Carlos. I know you probably can't help with that kind of money, but I thought maybe you might know someone, or have an idea." She assumed I couldn't help. Just like everyone else in my family, she had looked at my simple lifestyle and modest job and concluded that I couldn't possibly have access to that kind of money. It stung, but I understood. I had cultivated that image after all. "Don't worry about it," I told her. "I'll take care of it." "Carlos, that's so sweet, but I wasn't asking you to pay for it. I just thought maybe you'd have an idea." "Maria, I said I'll take care of it. Just give me the venue's contact information." There was a long pause. "Carlos, you can't possibly mean that's $45,000. I know exactly how much it is, and I'm telling you not to worry about it anymore." She cried harder then, but this time from relief and gratitude. "I can't let you do that. It's too much. What if we can't pay you back right away?" "Who said anything about paying me back? This is your wedding gift." The next day, I called La Mansion Dorada and spoke directly with the manager, Mr. Peterson. I explained the situation and arranged to pay the full amount immediately. I also requested that they handle it discreetly. Maria and David should never know where the money came from. As far as they would know, there had been a payment processing delay that was mysteriously resolved. "Are you sure about this arrangement, Mr. Martinez?" Mr. Peterson had asked. "It's quite unusual for someone to make such a substantial anonymous payment." "I'm sure. Just make sure the young couple can have their dream wedding without any more stress." When I hung up the phone, I felt a warm satisfaction. Maria deserved happiness, and if I could provide that for her, then my years of careful saving and investing had been worth it. The day of the wedding arrived, and I felt nervous as I adjusted my tie in the mirror. The suit looked decent on me, I thought. Simple, but appropriate. I had polished my shoes until they shone, pressed the suit carefully, and even bought a new tie for the occasion, a small concession to formality. I grabbed the wedding gift I'd carefully chosen, a beautiful set of crystal glasses I'd seen Maria admiring at a store months ago. It had cost me 2 weeks' salary, but seeing her face light up when she unwrapped it would be worth every penny. As I drove to the venue, I felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. I was looking forward to seeing Maria so happy, but I knew I'd be surrounded by family members who had always looked down on me. I had mentally prepared myself for the usual condescending comments about my job and lifestyle. The venue was breathtaking. La Mansion Dorada was everything I'd imagined and more when I was writing the check. Crystal chandeliers hung from ornate ceilings, casting rainbow patterns on the marble floors that gleamed under soft lighting. Enormous floral arrangements filled every corner. White roses, peonies, and baby's breath arranged in towering displays that must have cost more than most people's monthly salary. Guests in designer suits and elegant dresses moved gracefully through the space, their jewelry catching the light as they laughed and mingled with champagne glasses in hand. The architecture was stunning. High-vaulted ceilings with intricate molding, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens, and a grand staircase that curved dramatically toward the second floor. Everything was perfect, elegant, and expensive. I felt a quiet pride knowing that I had made this beauty possible for Maria, that her dreams were coming true because I had the means to help. And then I walked in. The moment I stepped through the main entrance, I felt it. The stares, the whispers, the barely concealed smirks. It was like a record scratch in a movie. Conversations paused, heads turned, and I could practically hear the collective intake of breath as my family members spotted me. My Aunt Carmen was the first to approach me, her eyes scanning my outfit from head to toe with obvious disapproval. She was wearing what looked like a designer dress with matching shoes and a handbag that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Oh, Carlos," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy and barely contained horror. "You came like that?" Before I could respond, my cousin Roberto appeared beside her, impeccably dressed in what was clearly a custom-tailored tuxedo. His shoes alone probably cost more than my entire outfit. He looked at me and shook his head with a condescending smile that I'd seen 1,000 times before. "Seriously, man? This is Maria's wedding, not a casual Friday at your job." The way he said job made it sound like something dirty, something shameful. I felt my face burn with embarrassment, but I tried to maintain my composure. "I thought I looked appropriate," I said quietly, adjusting my tie self-consciously. Carmen let out a small laugh that sounded more like a bark. "Appropriate? Darling, look around you. This is high society. People here are doctors, lawyers, business owners. David's family owns half the commercial real estate in the downtown district. You can't just show up looking well, like yourself." More family members began to gather around, and I could feel their judgment like physical weight on my shoulders. My cousin Patricia approached, dripping in diamonds that caught the chandelier light with every movement. Her dress looked like it belonged on a red carpet, not at a family wedding. "I can't believe he actually came dressed like that," she whispered loudly enough for me to hear. "It's so embarrassing for the family. What will David's parents think?" Uncle Miguel joined the growing circle of judgment, his disapproval written clearly across his face. "Carlos, didn't anyone tell you this was a formal event? This isn't your company Christmas party." "I know it's formal," I replied, my voice getting smaller. "This is my formal suit." The group exchanged glances that spoke volumes. These were looks I'd been receiving my entire life. Pity mixed with disdain. Disappointment mixed with superiority. They saw me as the family failure, the one who never quite measured up to their standards of success. Maybe we should find you something else to wear, Carmen suggested, as if she was talking to a child who had dressed himself incorrectly. Roberto, don't you have a spare jacket in your car? I don't think anything of mine would fit him, Roberto replied, looking me up and down like I was a mannequin. Besides, it's too late now. People have already seen him. The humiliation only got worse as the evening progressed. I tried to find a quiet corner where I could blend into the background, but it seemed like everywhere I went, someone had something to say about my appearance. During the cocktail hour, I approached a group of relatives I hadn't seen in years, hoping for a warm reunion. Instead, my Uncle Miguel looked at me with barely concealed disgust and said, "Carlos, I heard you're still doing maintenance work?" The way he said it made it sound like I was cleaning sewers with my bare hands. "Yes, I'm a supervisor now," I replied, trying to inject some pride into my voice. "I manage a team of 12 people and oversee maintenance for 3 office buildings." The group exchanged those familiar glances again. Miguel's wife, Teresa, adjusted her pearl necklace, which looked real and expensive, and smiled condescendingly. "How quaint. And you came here dressed like that? To Maria's wedding? Do you have any idea how much this venue costs? This place charges more per night than you probably make in a month." If only she knew, I thought bitterly. If only any of them knew that I could probably buy and sell half the people in this room. Other guests were starting to stare, and I could hear the whispers growing louder. Who is that man in the cheap suit? He looks so out of place here. Is he even supposed to be here? Is he part of the catering staff? One woman actually approached me and asked if I was there to fix something. "Excuse me," she said, looking confused. "Are you here about the sound system? Because the microphone at the front seems to be having some issues." I stared at her for a moment, processing that she had looked at me and immediately assumed I was hired help rather than a wedding guest. "No, ma'am. I'm family." She looked embarrassed, but not apologetic. "Oh, you looked like... Never mind." The worst part was when Maria's new in-laws approached me. David's mother, Mrs. Richardson, was an elegant woman in her 60s, dripping in designer everything from head to toe. Her dress looked like it belonged in a magazine, and her jewelry probably cost more than I spent on my car. She looked at me with the kind of expression you'd give to something unpleasant you'd stepped on. "And you are?" she asked coldly, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "I'm Carlos, Maria's cousin," I replied, extending my hand for a handshake and trying to smile warmly. She looked at my hand like it might contaminate her, then barely touched it with her fingertips before quickly pulling away and discreetly wiping her hand on her dress. "I see. And what do you do?" "I work in maintenance supervision." "Oh." She cut me off, her tone making it clear the conversation was over. She turned to her husband and said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "David, darling, remind me again why we're allowing just anyone into our family events? I thought this was supposed to be an exclusive celebration." I felt like I'd been slapped. The people around us chuckled nervously, and I saw several relatives turn away in embarrassment. Not for Mrs. Richardson's rudeness, but for my presence, as if I was the one who had committed some social crime. As dinner was served, I found myself seated at what was clearly the reject table, far from the main action, with distant relatives who barely acknowledged my existence and a few family friends who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. The centerpiece was smaller than the others, the flowers less fresh, and the service noticeably slower. I watched as my family members enjoyed their premium meals at the head tables while I picked at food that seemed like leftovers. The servers treated me differently too. While they were attentive and respectful to the other guests, they seemed to assume I didn't belong. One server actually asked me if I was sure I was at the right table, double-checking his seating chart with obvious confusion. But the absolute worst moment came during the toasts. When it was time for family speeches, several cousins stood up to share beautiful memories and wishes for the couple. I had prepared something heartfelt to say about Maria, about how proud I was of her, and how much her happiness meant to me. I had planned to talk about watching her grow up, about her kindness and her dreams, about how she deserved all the love and joy in the world. But when I started to stand up, Roberto grabbed my arm and pulled me back down. "What are you doing?" he hissed in my ear. I wanted to say something to Maria. "Absolutely not," Carmen interrupted from across the table, her voice sharp with panic. "This is not the time or place for people like you to draw attention to themselves. You've embarrassed us enough just by being here dressed like that." But I had something nice prepared. I said, "No, Carlos. Sit down and be quiet." I sat there, my prepared words dying in my throat, watching as person after person celebrated my cousin, while I was silenced and pushed aside. The crystal glasses I'd bought her sat unopened among a mountain of other gifts, probably forgotten already among the more expensive presents from her successful relatives. Roberto stood up and gave a beautiful speech about family and love. Patricia talked about Maria's strength and grace. Even distant cousins I barely knew were invited to share their thoughts. But me, the person who had quietly made this entire evening possible? I was told to sit down and be quiet. By the time the main course was served, I was seriously considering leaving. My hands were shaking slightly as I cut my steak, not from hunger, but from the overwhelming shame and anger building inside me. Every laugh from the nearby tables felt directed at me. Every whispered conversation seemed to be about my inadequacy. The final straw came during the cake-cutting ceremony. Maria looked absolutely radiant in her designer gown, and David stood beside her in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, both of them glowing with happiness. As they posed for photos, the photographer began organizing family shots. "All right, let's get the immediate family first," the photographer called out, and I watched as aunts, uncles, and cousins gathered around the happy couple. I stood up, assuming I would be included. After all, Maria and I had grown up together, practically like siblings when we were children. But as I approached the group, Carmen held up her hand like a traffic cop. "Excuse me, Carlos, but this is for immediate family only." I am immediate family," I stammered, confused and hurt. "Maria is my first cousin. We grew up together." Roberto snorted with derision. "Look, man, no offense, but look at this photo. Look at how everyone's dressed, and then look at yourself. You're going to ruin the entire aesthetic of Maria's wedding photos. These pictures will be displayed in their home for decades. Do you really want to be the eyesore in every single one? Do you want their children to ask who the poorly dressed man is?" The words hit me like a physical blow. Maria, my dear cousin Maria, whom I had just given $45,000 to make her dreams come true, stood there in silence. She looked at me with what I thought might be guilt, but she didn't say a word in my defense. Not one word. Maybe Carlos could be in some of the casual shots later," she finally whispered. But even that felt like charity, like throwing scraps to a dog. I stepped back, my face burning with humiliation so intense I thought I might faint. The photographer, clearly uncomfortable with the tension, quickly started snapping photos of my appropriately dressed family members, while I stood there like a rejected outsider, watching through a window at a life I was apparently not worthy to be part of. But the humiliation wasn't over. As the reception continued, I overheard a conversation that shattered what little dignity I had left. I was standing near the bar, trying to blend into the background and nursing a glass of water, when I heard David's father, Mr. Richardson, talking to a group of his business associates. "You know," he was saying, his voice carrying easily over the music, "when we agreed to help pay for this wedding, we assumed we'd be dealing with people of a certain caliber. But look at some of these guests. That man over there," and I knew without looking that he was pointing at me, "looks like he wandered in from the street. It's frankly embarrassing to be associated with this kind of element." One of his friends chuckled and nodded knowingly. "Well, you know how it is with these mixed-class families. There's always that one relative who brings down the whole tone of the event. At least the venue is nice enough to maintain some dignity." "Exactly, Mr. Richardson continued, warming to his theme. "Thank God we chose such an exclusive venue. At least the setting maintains some class, even if some of the guests don't. I just hope none of our business associates see us associated with that." That's when something inside me snapped. Not in anger, but in cold, calm clarity. Mr. Richardson thought he had helped pay for this wedding? The irony was so profound it was almost funny. Here was a man mocking me for not belonging in this venue, not knowing that the only reason he was standing in this beautiful space at all was because I had paid for it. I excused myself to the bathroom, where I stood in front of the mirror, looking at my reflection. The same face that had smiled proudly when I made the decision months ago now looked back at me with eyes full of hurt and determination. As I stood there, trying to collect myself, I heard the bathroom door open, and Roberto walked in with two of David's groomsmen. They were clearly drunk and didn't notice me in the corner stall. "Dude, I can't believe Carlos actually showed up dressed like that," Roberto was saying, his words slightly slurred. "My family is so embarrassed. We tried to hint that maybe he shouldn't come, but he's so clueless he didn't take the hint." "Who is he exactly?" one of the groomsmen asked. "Maria's cousin, total loser," works some dead-end maintenance job, lives in this tiny apartment, drives a car that's older than my little sister. The family joke, basically. We all just tolerate him because we have to. And he came to a wedding at La Mansion Dorada, dressed like he's going to a job interview at McDonald's, the other groomsmen added. And they all laughed like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. The funny part is, Roberto continued, clearly enjoying himself, he probably spent his entire paycheck on that cheap suit and thinks he looks good. It's actually kind of sad, but also hilarious. I can't wait to tell people about this. They continued laughing and making jokes at my expense for several more minutes before finally leaving. I waited until they were gone before I came out of the stall. My hands were surprisingly steady as I washed them, staring at my reflection. The family joke. That's what I was to them. Not Carlos, not Maria's childhood companion, who had always been there for family gatherings and celebrations. Just a punchline. As I walked back to the reception, I made a decision. I had endured enough humiliation for one evening. It was time for the truth to come out, and for these people to learn that their assumptions about others could be devastatingly wrong. I walked directly to the main table where Maria and David were sitting with their parents. The conversations around me continued, the laughter and mockery still echoing from various corners of the room. I approached the venue manager, Mr. Peterson, who was discreetly overseeing the event from the side of the room. "Excuse me, Mr. Peterson," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Could I have a word?" He looked at me with the same dismissive expression everyone else had been giving me all evening, clearly annoyed by the interruption. "I'm sorry, sir, but I'm quite busy managing the event. If you have a complaint about the service or the food—" "I'm Carlos Martinez," I interrupted, my voice calm but firm. "I believe you'll remember that name from your payment records." His expression changed instantly. His eyes widened and his professional demeanor shifted to one of respect and slight panic. "Mr. Martinez, I didn't recognize you. I'm so sorry, sir. How can I help you?" The conversation was quiet, but several people at nearby tables had started to notice. Mrs. Richardson, who had been holding court with her friends about the inappropriate guests, was now looking in our direction with curiosity. "I think it's time that everyone knew who actually made this beautiful evening possible," I said, my voice carrying just enough to be heard by the surrounding tables. Mr. Peterson nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Of course, sir. Would you like me to make an announcement?" "That won't be necessary," I replied. "But I think the bride and groom should know the truth about how their venue was paid for, don't you?" By now, a small crowd had gathered, including Maria and David, who were looking at me with confusion. Mr. Richardson pushed forward, clearly annoyed by the distraction and probably assuming I was causing some kind of scene. "What exactly is going on here?" he demanded, his voice full of authority and irritation. "We're trying to enjoy a wedding reception, and this person is disrupting the venue staff with some kind of complaint." Mr. Peterson looked between Mr. Richardson and me, clearly uncomfortable, but understanding his duty. "Sir, I think there may be some confusion about the financial arrangements for this event." "What kind of confusion?" David asked, stepping forward with growing concern. "My father and I handled all the payments. Everything was taken care of." "Actually," Mr. Peterson said carefully, choosing his words with obvious care, "the venue was paid for in full by Mr. Carlos Martinez 2 months ago. When you thought there was a payment processing delay that was mysteriously resolved, it was because Mr. Martinez had already covered the entire cost." The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that massive ballroom. Maria's face went pale, and David looked like he'd been struck by lightning. Mr. Richardson's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, no sound coming out. "That's impossible," Roberto stammered from behind the crowd, pushing forward with disbelief written across his face. "Carlos doesn't have that kind of money. He's just a maintenance worker. He drives a beat-up Honda and shops at discount stores." "The payment was $45,000, Mr. Peterson continued, his voice now carrying to most of the reception as word spread and people gathered around. "Paid in full in advance by Mr. Martinez here. One of the largest single payments we've ever received." Carmen pushed through the crowd, her face flushed with embarrassment and disbelief. "Carlos, what is he talking about? This has to be some kind of mistake." I looked around at all the faces staring at me. The same faces that had been mocking me, dismissing me, and treating me like I was beneath them all evening. The same people who had excluded me from family photos and told me to sit down and be quiet when I wanted to toast the bride. "What he's talking about, Carmen, is that when Maria and David were about to lose this venue because they couldn't make the payment, I covered it, the entire cost. This reception, this beautiful venue that you've all been so impressed with tonight, this elegant setting that you've been using to judge my worthiness, it all exists because I made it possible." Maria burst into tears, her carefully applied makeup beginning to run. "Carlos, I had no idea. When you said you'd take care of it, I thought you meant you'd help us find a loan or maybe ask around for ideas. I never imagined you could. I never thought you had. So, you never asked," I said simply, my voice steady but sad. "You just assumed, like everyone else, that I couldn't possibly have the means to help in any meaningful way. You assumed that because I dress simply and drive an old car, I must be poor." The crowd around us had grown larger, and whispers were spreading throughout the reception like wildfire. Guests were pulling out their phones, probably to text friends about the drama unfolding before their eyes. Mr. Richardson looked absolutely mortified as he realized what he had said earlier about helping pay for the wedding. "How?" Patricia asked, her voice barely a whisper, her diamond jewelry suddenly seeming less impressive. "How do you have that kind of money?" "The same way anyone builds wealth, Patricia. By living below my means, making smart investments, and not spending every dollar I earn on impressing people who clearly aren't worth impressing." I looked around the circle of shocked faces. "While you were all buying expensive cars and designer clothes to look successful, I was actually building something real. I own 3 rental properties, have a diversified investment portfolio, and yes, I could afford to give my cousin her dream wedding without thinking twice about it." Teresa, who had earlier mocked my income and suggested this venue cost more than I made in a month, looked like she wanted to disappear into the marble floor. But you dress so simply. You drive that old car. You live in that small apartment." "Because I don't need to prove my worth through material possessions," I replied, looking directly at her. "I don't need a designer suit to know who I am or what I'm capable of. But apparently, all of you do. You judge a person's entire worth based on the price tag of their clothing." The weight of the revelation was sinking in around the room. People who had been laughing at me an hour ago were now staring in stunned silence, their faces a mixture of shame, disbelief, and awkward embarrassment. The venue staff, who had initially treated me with the same dismissiveness as the guests, were now looking at me with newfound respect and probably wondering if they should apologize. David stepped forward, tears in his eyes, his voice cracking with emotion. "Carlos, I don't know what to say. We had no idea. If we had known it was you who saved our wedding, if we had known you made this sacrifice for us, would it have mattered?" I asked, cutting him off. "Would you have treated me differently tonight if you had known? Would any of you?" I looked around the circle, making eye contact with each person who had mocked me. "Because I'm the same person I was when you were mocking my suit an hour ago. The only thing that's changed is your perception of my bank account." Maria was sobbing now, reaching for my hand desperately. "Carlos, I'm so sorry. I'm so ashamed of how everyone treated you tonight. How I treated you by not defending you. I should have stood up for you. I should have told them to stop. I should have—" "Yes, you should have," I said gently but firmly. "Not because of what I did for your wedding, but because I'm your family. Because I'm a human being who deserved basic respect and dignity, regardless of how much money I have in the bank." Mr. Richardson cleared his throat, his face red with embarrassment, and what might have been the first shame he'd felt in years. "Mr. Martinez, I owe you a profound apology. My comments earlier were completely inappropriate and inexcusable. I had no right to judge you based on your appearance, and Your comments earlier revealed exactly what kind of person you are," I interrupted, my voice calm but cutting. "Just like everyone else's behavior tonight revealed who they really are when they think they're dealing with someone they perceive as beneath them. You showed me your true character, Mr. Richardson. The fact that you're apologizing now only proves that your respect is conditional on net worth." The reception had effectively stopped. The music was still playing, but every conversation had died as word spread throughout the room about what had happened. People were staring, pointing, whispering. But now, instead of mocking me, they were staring in awe and embarrassment, probably wondering what other assumptions they had made about people in their lives. Roberto pushed through the crowd, his face a mixture of shame and disbelief, his earlier confidence completely gone. "Carlos, man, we had no idea. I said some terrible things tonight, things I can't take back, and You said exactly what you believed," I replied, looking at him with disappointment rather than anger. "The fact that you're apologizing now only proves that your respect is conditional on my net worth. What does that say about your character, Roberto? What does that say about any of you?" I looked around at the sea of faces, all of them people who had known me for years, even decades, and had chosen to judge me based on the price of my clothing, rather than the content of my character, or the decades of kindness I had shown them. "I want you all to remember this moment," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the now silent reception. "Remember how quickly you dismissed someone you've known your entire lives because of superficial judgments. Remember how easily you mocked and excluded someone who had just given everything to make this night possible for people he loved. Remember how your assumptions about worth and success blinded you to reality." I turned to Maria, who was still crying, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "I'm happy I could give you your dream wedding, Maria. You deserved a beautiful celebration of your love, and seeing you happy made every penny worth it. But I'm disappointed that it took a financial revelation for your own family to treat me with basic human dignity." With that, I turned and walked toward the exit. Behind me, I could hear voices calling my name, people trying to apologize, explain, make amends. But I didn't turn around. Some lessons can only be learned through consequence, and this was one of them. As I reached the door of La Mansion Dorada, the venue I had quietly paid for so my cousin could have her perfect day, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was done trying to earn respect from people who only valued net worth over human worth. The valet brought my old but reliable Honda Civic around, and as I drove away from the most expensive party I'd ever thrown, I realized something important. I had learned exactly who my real family was that night, and more importantly, I had learned that my worth had never been dependent on their approval. Sometimes the most expensive lessons are the ones that teach us we didn't need to pay the price in the first place. But sometimes, paying that price is the only way to reveal the true cost of people's character. As I drove home through the quiet city streets, I couldn't help but smile. Tomorrow, I would wake up in my simple apartment, put on my simple clothes, and go to my simple job. But I would do it all with the knowledge that I had more dignity in my little finger than all of those people had in their designer-clad bodies. And that, I realized, was worth far more than $45,000.